Hello, everyone, and welcome to Take Flight, the show that helps new designers get their dreams off the runway and into the sky. I'm your flight attendant, Kat, and I am delighted to introduce you to our crew for this flight. In the back of the aircraft, we have got Tony running the stream. You can't hear Tony, but he's here. So thanks, Tony.
Help!
No one can help you. You're trapped, Tony. Seated in the pilot seat is GM Ben Competence. Ben, how are you doing tonight? Ben has become muted. Ben is still muted.
Okay.
There he is.
We spent a half hour setting all of this up. You told me not to touch anything. I touched one thing, and here we are.
Ben, you touched a thing?
Touched a thing. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited and really honored and flattered that you're all having me on the stream.
This is going to be so fun. And part of the reason that it is going to be fun is because we have in the co-pilot seat, we have Shadowrun line developer Jason Hardy here. Hi, Jason.
Hello, how's it going?
I am having a great time. How are you?
Good. Having a good day.
Thank you so much for showing up to help us out and give us your wisdoms.
Wait, you said no self-deprecation, so I can't say what I was going to say.
No, this is a no self-deprecation loud zone.
This is going to be hard.
It's going to be hard, but you can do it. I believe in you. So we are going to be talking about, because one of the things that came up is that Ben is one of those creators, and some of you are in chat, I know you are, who has about 1 billion things on the go right now, myself included, calling myself out. But today we are especially going to be talking about LOOTSPLOSION. And Ben, I would love for you to tell chat and me and Jason the rundown. Would you please?
All right. So LOOTSPLOSION is sort of a game that was made in honor of my absolute love of the Borderlands looter shooter action video game series. And I wanted to bring that to tabletop games. I know that tabletop gaming has a lot of really cool moments with dice. There's a lot of very visceral moments where you roll a die, you get a critical hits, you get critical fumbles, misses, and all those things. The dice tell the stories. They say, I wanted to translate the fun of finding loot into tabletop games in a generated way where if you defeat monsters, accomplish great things, you can grab a handful of dice, you roll those out, and there's sort of a conversion table to determine what loot you get and what quality it is, along with some randomly generated elements. So you might get fire weapons or shields or things like that. When you're playing the game, I wanted to create the visceral moment you have in video games where you do something big and there's like tons of shining, flashing lights come on, and then you just pile through and see what you get. So my system that I'm working on is I'm trying to bring fast, sort of medium to light rules in systems to tabletop games where you can have a big moment, you defeat the big bad, and the GM just grabs a huge freaking handful of dice and just throws them on the table. And you just get to see and go through and see like, okay, which ones are 20s, which ones are 6s, did we get any blue dice, and have that visceral moment in tabletop games. So that's my attempt to bring that feeling and that moment to tabletop gaming.
Oh, geez. I wish I'd picked a better co-pilot for you. Jason doesn't know anything about huge fistfuls of dice.
Yeah, that turned me off right there. I don't know why we want to do that.
I wish I'd thought this through better. So, chat, for the next about half hour or so, you, me, and Jason are going to be asking Ben questions to get a better idea of where he's at with LOOTSPLOSION, what is done, what's not done, what needs to happen. And once we're done that, we're going to switch over to Ben, and Ben's going to ask us questions. You still get to, by the way, chat. You can ask us questions anytime. And we're going to kind of zero in on what needs to be done and what kind of support we can offer Ben on this project. So,
I appreciate that.
Jason, do you have any questions for Ben right now?
Yeah, a couple. What part of the design and development process is like the fun, exciting part to you?
Right now, I like designing different interlocking systems and seeing how things come together in different ways. Because I know that, like with a lot of games, you can have too many different systems or like things that don't really sync up elegantly. So I'm trying to find ways to make everything interlock. Having a loot system that's fun, trying to figure out how to snap that into a combat system that's fun, and then lock that into like a character creation. Like I sort of like figuring out how to make all the different aspects of it and sort of connect them, figure out where they can interlock in fun ways. I like coming up with the ideas, drafting them, figuring out how to flesh them out. I don't really like the nitty gritty drilling down on one topic for too long. Like I came up with a loot system. I've drafted a bunch of different ways to make the loot work, and then I made like 5 or 6 different categories for each type of loop, enough to like test it out on like my spreadsheets and my apps and everything. And then once I get that going, I'm like, okay, now on to the combat. Like I have like a little bit of each thing that I'm penciling in to make sure that it works enough, and then filling in the greater details later. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, and it also starts to get to a follow-up question. Which parts of the process make you go, "Ugh."
I think that there's 2 parts for a tabletop RPG that sort of do that for me. The first is going into what was it? The 2 is going too far into one system in a way where it starts to feel like repetitive. Like I figured out how to make automatically generated loot where you roll dice and there's a conversion guide to see what loot you get from which device. Is this a fire gun? Is this an ice shield? Things like that. Like I know how to do that, but then you kind of need to come up with all of the details, like how many different types of weapons are there? How many different elements of weapons are there? What is the second follow-up? Is a gun is a pistol different than a shotgun in a meaningful way? And if so, how many variations are you? And for this loot system to be interesting, there has to be a wide variety. So fleshing out a lot of those details is that. The other one that I have, I think it just stresses me out a little bit, is the balance between not enough systems or not enough mechanics and too many mechanics. I think that there are games that very famously have like rules for everything, and then there are games that have not enough rules or leave things sort of unfilled in and stuff like that. And I'm trying to find a balance on that. I am not a numbers guy. In all of my GMing, when players ask me numbers, I always tell them what number sounds cool. It's like, how tall is this room? I say it's as tall as the cool thing you want to do, and that's always the ruling that I give them. But I know when I'm designing the systems, I have to have a number answer and stuff like that. The very nitty gritty nuances kind of wear me down.
Okay, I have got a follow-up question for that one. What is a game that you feel like does not have enough rules for what you try to do with it? We're not looking to call anybody out right now, but I'm just trying to get a feel of just like, because I like very rules light games, but what's too rules light for you?
There is no, basically for me, there's no 2 rules light, and sometimes there's no 2 rules heavy. It's when a game doesn't do what it wants to do because it doesn't have the right systems for it. I like Pathfinder, and I like Fiasco. If you ever played Fiasco, there are no stats in that game. You literally just describe what you want to do and you do it. But things like Dungeons and Dragons, I think, sort of frustrates me a little bit because when I run on systems with when I'm running systems with friends, and we've done this with my live shows and stuff like that, sometimes the game just sort of feels like it's missing rules in some ways. Like there's like there's like not a lot of rules for social encounters, and not a lot of rules like almost. I don't want to dig in on D&D too much, but like outside of outside of tone, there's not a lot of difference between persuasion and intimidation mechanically. You're both rolling a flat charisma check to get your way. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like there's things in the game that aren't really shaded in and are sort of like, and that sort of stuff makes me feel like if you have a system, you should explore what you want to do with it. If you want it to just be rule of cool and just for fun, you should go with that. But like, I feel like when a system's half committed, that's when the problem comes in. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it's not whether a game is 2 rules light for you, it's whether you're opening the drawer looking for a rule and not finding one.
Yes. That's why I actually like rules light game, and then I like Pathfinder because I'm like, oh well, this is what I wanted to do. So no, that's absolutely it.
Okay. I've got a question for you from chat. Cassie wants to know, do you see this as more of a collaborative game or a GM controlled game?
I think this is going to be a GM controlled game because I think that the GM will be in charge of the villains, the antagonists, and also deciding when to reach into the bag and throw out a big dice of loot dice and stuff like that to see what people get. So there will be a guided narrator for a lot of this, coming up with adventures. I intend for it to not require a lot of planning in advance, but some moderate planning.
Gotcha. Okay. What are you thinking,
Also,
Jason?
hi, Cassie. Sorry, I know
hi,
Cassie.
Cassie.
They're a delightful person.
Yeah, I don't know. Cassie's a delight. Everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, let me think here. Okay, here's a design process question.
Mm-hmm.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I woke up this morning and I think it would be cool to write a game like Borderlands,
Mm-hmm.
and 10 being I have a product. Would you like to read it?
How far along? How far? I think it's
That's
right now. I would probably say between a maybe a 4 or something, maybe a 4 to a 5, because I have pages of notes of mechanics, of interlocking rules, of systems. I could describe. I could do a very simple fight with just like really basic characters and things like that. But it's fleshing it out, scribbling in the details, and basically building it to a system that allows like customization, unique experiences, and things like that that I need to do. So it's built a bit, but it's not built enough to like show open experiences to people and stuff like that. Does that make sense, or you know?
Do you
so.
feel you know what the next steps are to get it to a 5 or a 6?
I think that right now, there's certain game mechanics I want to fill in, social mechanics. I always feel like it's difficult to do social mechanics in a game that's combat or vice versa. But I want to figure that out, put that in, and then make enough test basically character building tools so that if someone was trying it out, I could build a couple different characters on the fly to try out in battles and combat and stuff like that. Do a very simple battle against some random bandits and get some loot from that.
Are there any obstacles to doing that?
I think that some obstacles is, and this is the sort of where I reached out to taking flight, was a lot of my obstacles would be I struggle with project management and sort of anxiety and visually understanding what to do next. I talked about the idea of, you know, drilling in on one thing, getting overwhelmed by one section and going on that and it becoming a bit much. And I think that some of my projects, I sometimes, the more I work on them, the more that I can get excited. I can fill in a lot of details, but then sometimes I get overwhelmed as to where to go next and how to move ahead in a project. I have an anecdote about that for something else that I can mention later. I want to make sure I answer these questions, but yeah.
Okay. So I've got one for you from chat. Frequently Not on Boats has asked, question for Ben, are you attached to this as a game/system in and of itself, or you have typed and now I can't find it? Sorry. give me a second here. Or would you consider making it more of a modular lock into whatever system you want to play add-on?
So I apologize. So the system for the rules for this game would be a self-contained world for now. Basically, because the mechanics assume that you have guns, that you have shields, that you have magic and tech and things like that. I draw a lot from Borderlands experience to try and translate it into a tabletop world. I think that it could work modular. This actually began as a variable loot system for Dungeons and Dragons, where every time you killed a monster, they would explode into like different magic items and stuff like that, and they'd be very mundane. Like you could have like an axe, but it does fire damage instead of slashing damage or something like that. And that was the system that I worked on for a while, and then I looked at that and I'm like, but I want guns. And then I was like, well, I can't put guns in D&D and keep it the same vibe. And then I'm like, and then it was like D&D has like very tactical measured combat that could take like 15, 20 an hour minutes to do. An hour minutes. And I'm like, okay, well, I want guns. Okay, what if I had a system where you could do combat in like 5 minutes and get loot from it so that you had that sort of fast blasting feel? And then I was sort of like more thought about it, I'm like, okay, I want this to be my own system. So it actually did start as a D&D module or add-on, and then it became its own thing.
Okay.
Which I think goes to the scope creep thing that I had in my mind to talk about later.
It'll get you.
Yeah.
Hunk
of Dice was my nickname. Tony, that's a wonderful nickname.
Yeah, it's very good. Okay.
So, do you have an idea of what the final version of this looks like? You know, is it a book? Is it 100 pages? Is it 200 pages? Is it 50 pages? Do you have a conception of
I don't
what
have a
kind of form it takes?
It would be a book. My idea is for it to be a book, and a decent amount of obviously, I want it to be just you need the book. I don't want it to be too heavy into like needing miniatures or unique dice or anything like that. I think that a book would be just fine. I was realizing, and this is a thought that was occurring to me earlier, which is a completely different project, but there are benefits to something like this being a digital module, like even if it's just a PDF or was it Roll20 and other virtual tabletops have things that adapt systems like this well. But that's a side project. The short version is that I would like it to be an individual single book to start.
About how long?
I don't know how to pick a scope on that. That's something I could use some advice on because I get overwhelmed with those things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's
yeah. I feel like I might be missing some key questions here.
no.
No, this is useful because it helps me see what kind of hopefully useful suggestions I can make.
Exactly. Jason just crumples up a piece of paper that just says spreadsheets in capital letters and tosses it over his shoulder.
Oh, spreadsheet would be very helpful. Yeah, I want to figure out how to structure this because like that's the problem for me is like I can't figure out. That's just something I've struggled with a lot with my previous projects because I do design a bunch of projects, and the thing that I always get with is I don't know when to stop and where to cut and how to make it a manageable thing. I mentioned that I had an anecdote, and I think it's irrelevant here, but I'll keep it short. I designed a board game a few years ago that I was very proud of. I worked on it for a long time. I brought it to conventions. I played it. It was a blast. There was just one thing where like everybody had fun, but they were just like, okay, this one game mechanic doesn't work. This one game mechanic dragged it down. I said, okay. I went home. I started looking at that game mechanic, and I was like, oh, well, I can fix this if I add a new system. And then I was like, well, if I add that new system, I can balance it with this. And then I looked at it, I'm like, I'm trying to add 3 new game mechanics to fix the fact that one was not as fun. And then that sort of became overwhelming. So I can't I need to figure out the way to structure these things where it stays on topic in a way that's doesn't underdevelop, but doesn't overcomplicate.
Okay.
We just got a notification about the...
Don't worry about it. Yeah, we're on it. So I have a question for you, Ben. What do you feel like you're nailing right now in this project?
I think right now what I'm doing really well is that I think that the system is very evocative of the visceral sensations of playing a fast-paced game with lots of loot. I think that I have a system where you can finish combat quickly but still express yourself within the system. I think that you can be very excited about the loot that you get within the game, that you can design your own character with a heavy emphasis on what is fun to play and not as what is like min-maxy best numbers to play. I think that it has a good intuitive system that keeps combat from getting slowed down too much. So it's something that I think feels like a translation of an action game while still carrying that tabletop customization and personal strategy and things like that.
Okay. So the mood, the vibes are golden. The vibes are perfect.
the vibes are golden. I like a lot of the abilities and stuff like that. Like I've made a lot of abilities and stats and everything that let you feel unique and let you feel like your own contributing character to the game. I've also developed, I think, a combat system that I'm excited about because it expedites combat quite a bit. All of the guns in the game have a die roll gauge. For example, each type of gun has a different size of die, and there's a range on the die. Which number misses, which one does a hit, and which one does a crit. You don't roll for damage. You either miss or you do 3 points of damage or 6 points of damage or things like that. So it's very efficient. If you have a shotgun, all of the dice have like a large range to miss, but also have a large damage dealing and things like that. So you can roll, you can like, if you want to grab a shotgun and you do that effect, you can grab like 6d6s and roll them. If you want to snipe somebody, you can grab a d20 and then you roll 2d20, keep the higher number that you like and discard the other one and stuff like that. So you have one very precise shot and things like that. So I think that it's very fun when you play, that the loot works, that the rolling works, the combat, the different weapons feel like they're expressing what you're trying to get across at the table, in that regard. It's a lot of, I think that's a lot of fun. Something I really enjoy is making the different guns feel like they're unique styles as well.
Okay. So going forward, regardless of what you do and don't decide to rip out and throw in the big stinky trash pile, you definitely want all of the guns you want character builds to feel unique and satisfying and exciting.
Unique and satisfying and exciting, and for there to be a decent loot system in the game. I think those are the two things that I want to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So when do I go to publication? When do I go to Kickstarter? No, I'm just kidding. I got so much work to do on this. I appreciate that.
Well, that's it's part of the reason that I called you all here today is that there has been a murder most foul. The other part of the reason that I called you here today, though, is because I very much wanted to have an episode to highlight I have so many ideas. How do I get from there to book? Stage of game development, because as a stage everybody hits, there's a lot of game designers in chat who are feeling seen in this instant. So I'm glad that we get to have a show to talk about the stage you're in. It's nothing to shy away from. It happens.
I am so relieved and excited because like I said, I have all these notes and I have all these systems and I don't even know where to begin with what I'm talking about with the guns and mechanics and everything, and I'm very excited about it. I love it. But then part of me is like, okay, I have all of this, but it's not ready to publish as a book. What happens when I get on there and they find out that I'm a fraud? So finding out this is the exact stage, we're perfectly synced. That makes me very excited.
That's why, literally why I called you here. So Cassie has another question for you, Ben. Will this have Cassie, it's not that surprising.
What's up?
Will this have a session structure? Cassie's thinking about Borderlands level design.
Right now, I don't have an idea for session structure. I was kind of thinking of more of that D&D Pathfinder thing of like, just, you play until you hit a stopping point and then you take a break. I've been becoming more aware of and learning more about systems that have a specific beginning, middle, and end to their structure. I find it interesting, but I'm not really sure how I'd adapt that into the system yet.
Okay.
But I'm open to ideas.
Okay.
What are your feelings on outlines?
I would love to. Yes, that would be very good for me to have. And the second I hear this and I hear my feeling on outline is the same feeling I had when I came to understand your work and what it entails a lot better. Oh God, I need to learn those skills. I don't have an outline for my projects. Right now I have tabs open for all of the different mechanics and how they fit together, and I've got 10 tabs open for every aspect of the game. So,
Man, you're giving me contact anxiety just by describing that.
This is my world. It is tabs and anxiety.
Okay. No, that's okay. How does the core mechanic work? Like when a player says, I would like to accomplish a task, what are they doing to do that?
I think for the core task, because the game is so action-based, I want to start with combat. Each action in combat, you have your guns, you equip them. And this is going to sound, I would love feedback on whether this sounds nuts. I like it, but I think it sounds bizarre. Combat always takes place on a grid, but not the traditional each square is 5 feet thing. All combat scenes are a 5x5 grid that represents how relatively close you are to each other. So if you're in the same square melee, if you're 1 or 2 squares away, it's a bit far away, but there aren't exact numbers on this. Your guns, each gun is marked with how many squares away it can hit, or melee weapons if they hit the melee one. When you want to target somebody, you roll a die to see, like I said, on the gun, they have a range. So like if you have a pistol, you might roll a 1d8. The number 1 is a miss, number 2 through 6 is a hit, 7 through 8 is a crit, and then there's a guide on the card saying how much damage it does. So you shoot somebody you hit. Most enemies, most allies have stats representing how they can respond to damage, whether they reduce the number you rolled by 1 because they move very quickly, or they take 1 less damage and things like that. Generally speaking, you assume that you hit in dice, but you move your on your turn, you move to a position you want. You get 2 actions. They can be shooting twice, or shooting and hiding, or using an ability. All of the special abilities in the game have cooldowns, which is every time it's your turn, you basically check off a box until it's refreshed and you can use it again. Killing enemies provides what's called a rush, and rushes are tokens that can be redeemed to expedite cooldowns or to otherwise activate abilities on your cards. So as you go on, as you get more successful, you can sort of chain and combo more abilities together. This is my general idea, and I think that different guns roll different dice. Like I said, a shotgun may have an ability where if you're shooting somebody in melee range, you roll 66 dice, and you have the standard number. But if they're not in the same square as you, then you roll 66, but 3 through 1 are considered miss range instead of just 1, and things like that, to sort of adapt for the range of things like that. And that's generally where combat is. When you defeat enemies, each enemy type has a guide as to how much loot that they drop, which is how many dice the GM rolls. You then use those dice rolls to consult the table and figure out what loot you get. That is my basic combat loop, which is the core of the game.
Okay.
Jason, you work on Shadowrun. How much of that made sense on a scale of like 1 to 10, like 50%?
No, it generally made sense, and especially when you were talking about putting it on a kind of abstract grid system, because Shadowrun Anarchy, which is the most rules light version of Shadowrun there is, did a kind of similar thing, not with the grid way that you're presenting it, so it's a little different, but it describes characters' position just relative to each other, whether they're close or near or far range, so that you don't have to map things out precisely. You can just define it in terms of their relationship to each other, and that's it. So that makes sense.
Exactly. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, because like with a sniper, I don't want to say like a sniper rifle. I don't want to look it up and go, a sniper rifle does 300 feet unless they're ducking, then it's 250 feet. It's like, no, are they on the opposite side of the map? That's what snipers are for. Yep. Like that's exactly how I wanted it to work. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. For something that you want to move quickly, abstracting distance like that can really help, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Speaking of abstracting, how kind of abstracted in general is stuff? Is things? Okay, let me be a
stuff is a pretty abstract term.
Stuff is pretty abstract.
You know what? You've got me there. Okay, you've got me there. You're describing a lot of systems and a lot of mechanics that you're working on. So, how many? Like, how do I put this? How many things have specific bespoke rules for them versus how many things fit into kind of a more general system? Like,
I'm sorry, that's
yeah.
How many things have a specific system? How many specific rules? See, that's an issue that I have problems with. I have the combat designed. I have the loot system designed. And I think that, what you're getting at is having a unique dice rules for each system. And I think that the problem that I'm having is that all of my systems really only work for the thing that they work for, which I think you caught on, and I'm worried about that. Like my loot system, the dice rules only work for the loot. For the gun system, you can't really translate that gun system to social mechanics and stuff like that. So I'm trying to figure out what's interlocking and what's too conflicting or overlapping. So,
my concern is not conflict or overlap. My concern is mental load. If every task a player wants to accomplish has a bespoke mechanic, makes it much harder for the players to remember how to play the game.
That's a very good point. I'm sorry, I'm going over this in my head right now and realizing that I could take the gun system and translate that to social mechanics of just basically, like I said, having a miss range, a hit range, a crit range, and adapting that to their different social skills. And holy, are we allowed to swear on your stream? Is that allowed or no?
Have
Holy
I ever
gosh.
sworn? Have I ever sworn on this show, Tony?
Tony's
Probably.
Tony, I think you're muted
You've
right
sworn
now.
off
But,
this show a whole lot. I know
he
that.
seems mirthful, so I assume that there is profanity
Probably.
allowed.
I like to say cuss words every so often to prove
Okay.
that I'm a grown up. So okay.
Okay.
I also will
no,
just
but that
clock
is
in and be
actually
like,
that is genuinely an exciting idea that you're giving me and pushing me to, with the idea of unifying it as a system. Because I'm sitting here, I was about to be like, well, obviously the gun system can't work for the social system. And this voice maker goes, well, why not? And then
How
I'm
obvious
like,
is that? Yeah.
yeah. And now you're sitting here. You
I
can
just
go
want to
back
call
and
out
click,
from
you
the
can go back if you want and clip the moment that I realized how to make this game work.
Yeah.
So,
from the
so
control
thank you.
tower. I just
Well,
loved
you look at
watching
D&D.
Jason
And the core
start to
mechanic of
nod.
D&D is you roll a d20.
Mhm.
You add your stat, you add your skill. You compare that to a threshold established by the game master.
Mhm.
Virtually most things in D&D are this series of physical actions. That's what makes it unified.
And that allows you to improvise, even if you don't remember the specific rules, you can still come up with something
Yes.
because you know the core mechanic.
And you could build on that. That's where, like, you have maybe you're casting Finger of Death, and now your opponent is the one who does these actions to see if they die or not. But
God damn it.
so, like, you can play with it, but even very crunchy games like Dungeon Dragon and Pathfinder and Shadowrun are often usually like satellites orbiting a central mechanic.
In Shadowrun, if you know, add skill and attribute, roll that many d6s, count 5s and 6s, you can improvise a lot from there.
Oh my God. You all are beautiful people.
Welcome to the
Yeah.
show, Ben.
That is.
We explode the bones here.
This is. So I said I have a bunch of tabs, and I have another tab open for notes I want to look into later. This is all. My second computer monitor of 3 is a shrine to ADHD, and I just I'm scribbling down I'm gonna go nuts with after the show. You are wonderful.
Tony has made a very insightful comment in chat, which is that he loves the flavor of bringing that explosion quality to social encounters or explorations.
I really like exploring what different combos of dice can do when you have, this many d6s or this d20 or however many. That there's a lot of fun combinatorics that you can do with that.
Yeah.
That would be fun for you to play with.
I'm writing this down.
That's fully just like rolling a mitt full of dice and Yahtzeeing like a bunch of 12s or what have you. That sounds fun to me.
The deep historic secret I learned at Gen Con was that Shadowrun First Edition was a D10 dice pool game originally.
Oh yeah.
But fairly late in the process, they changed it to D6 because it was easier to find D6s. Like you can get them at drugstores, you can't get D10s at drugstores. So they switched it, but some people swear it works better with D10s.
That's a weird thing that I want to keep in mind with game design. And that's one of my low-key goals of my game, is making sure that it doesn't require specific resources. Like you said, the D6 thing. Like everybody can go into their hall closet and grab a bunch of D6s. But if and see, I know that I use D4s and D6s for my guns, but I want to make sure it doesn't require too many specialty parts. And like a 7th Sea is one of my favorite games out there. It's a phenomenal game, but it requires just a heck ton more D10s than the average person would have. So like, you have a bunch of D6s. You have those from different games. You have a D&D dice. You have one of each. If you want to get into 7th Sea, you can't just like whip it out. You have to go to like a store and get like a bunch of D10s for that. So I wanted to make mine something that you didn't need to like make a special run to get dice for.
I've got
Okay.
3 things.
Yeah, no, I'm going through my head. I'm getting hyper
Yeah.
thinking about this. Go ahead.
I've got 3 things. The first is, even as recently as my college days, which were 2 decades ago. Oh, okay. Well, it's not that recently, but when we were designing back in college, that was why we went with D6s as well, is because they're easy to get. You can raid other games for them. You can nowadays, of course, there's online dice rollers. Nowadays, you've got dice roll apps on your phone. You can have what the heck ever you want without actually needing to do manufacturing. So we're in a very exciting period dice wise.
Oh, that's a very good point.
But I really need to bring up what Roll for Felicity has said, because Taylor has said, I love the idea of social abilities having gun-like similarities, like a sniping wit.
Yeah, that's
cute.
I was staring at that, and I was like, that is. I'm like, that is really clever.
Also, I played enough. I played enough Legend of the Five Rings that I have way more D10s than a person should have.
Alderrock, yes, that whole. Oh my gosh, Kat, you're wonderful. Yes, that whole system, the John Wick systems of theatrical storytelling. Yes, okay. I
like Lefevre.
I am the chat suggestions, Kat and Jason, your ideas and feedback, and my mind is racing with things I want to talk about now.
You gotta chill, Ben, because it's your turn. Well, wait. Oh, Jason, do you have any more questions for Ben before I turn the floor over to Ben to ask us questions?
I think I'm okay at the moment. There might be other comments as we go along, but I think it'd be good for him to ask.
Yeah, okay. So Ben, the floor is yours. If you have questions for Jason, if you have this is your time. Chat, if you have questions for Jason, this is also your time. If you want to know about the wisdoms it takes to get a collection of thoughts into a shiny book.
Yeah. So I guess, Jason, my first question for you, I'm sorry, I just what was it? They said they mentioned the outline and development process. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that, because I mean, that's when I registered with Kat and I sent to test flight. Is my my concern is I can't figure out where to go next in the process. So I'm kind of trying to figure out what works in a way that makes it productive, but also an interesting passion project and stuff like that, like something that's exciting and compelling to do. So how do you approach structuring something like this as far as a work project?
So a couple of things. First of all, and this is the sad fact of any creative career, there's going to be drudgery. There's going to be the moments that are tough, and that's what often separates the people who are able to make at least some money from it or some completion, and those who don't, is that you stick through the drudgery. My wife is an artist, and she loves to paint and she loves to create, and then there's a time she has to fill out a form for an art show and put the labels on this, and it's just, there's always some drudgery. She does a big collective art project at Gen Con where people can come and help make a big mural, and so that's really fun to design the mural. But the part where she has to trace over all the lines to transfer the design onto canvas is not fun. So you gotta do the drudgery parts to get to the fun parts, and sometimes the fun parts need to be completed by the drudgery parts. But specifically about outlines, when I was starting to think about Shadowrun 6, I knew one of the first things I needed to do was come up with a good project code word, because I didn't do that on Shadowrun 5, and the management then picked a code word specifically to annoy me, and I didn't want to have a code word that annoyed me for the whole time. So I was trying to think of a good code word for the project, and I had just heard something that Jack White of the White Stripes said. And people were, asked him about his band and how it's so minimal, just guitar, drums, that's it. Why was he keeping the White Stripes so minimal? And he said, when I have some constraints, then that can make me more creative, or at least it can give me a direction for my creativity. If I don't have those constraints, I'm all over the place. I don't know where to focus. All my energy is going in all these different directions, and I can't harness it. So the constraints give him a way to harness the energy. And so that's the way I think about outlines a lot, is it gives you a way to harness and control some of that energy. So code name for Shadowrun 6 was Project White Stripes, which I was happy to have that as a code name, because the constraint we put on that is right from the get-go, this is going to be 300 pages. So we wanted to make an edition of Shadowrun that was 300 pages when the previous one was almost 400 pages. So everything kind of flowed from that constraint. If I'm going to cut 100 pages out of the rule book, I need to streamline some rules. Where can I streamline? And then what implications does that, it becomes a series of dominoes. But I'm a big fan of getting an outline from the beginning. Every Shadowrun project starts with a project spec that gives the word count and then divides that word count into chapter outlines and describes that chapter briefly. So then everyone knows what the book is going to look like. I've got another project I'm working on. I can't say it publicly yet, unfortunately. One of these days I'll be able to.
Just confirmed Shadowrun 7. Clip this out of context. Sorry. Go on.
It's not Shadowrun at all. But it one of the early things I did was a chapter outline because I needed to figure out how is this project going to look. And the other thing about a chapter outline, besides just giving you some idea of what does each chapter need to be, what do I need to work on, it can give you ways to bounce around the project when one part of it starts to feel less fun. So if I'm working like on the magic system for Shadowrun 6 for a while and I made some good headway, but I know the next thing I need to do is try to write up all the spells I've designed, and that's a little bit of a drag. Well, then maybe I can play over with the edge system for a little bit. And then I can write up some edge mechanics. And then I can come back and write a few spells. And so sometimes if your mind works that way to bounce around, the outline gives you areas you can bounce to. So you can say, well, I'm tired of this right now. I'm going to bounce over to this and have something else to do. And you're still making progress toward the end goal because you know what the end goal is. But then the other thing I'd say about outlines is it's also important to not be bound by them. Constraints are great, straitjackets aren't. So don't make yourself too confined by it. If you need to shift the outline, shift the outline. We are final drafts for one book that we're working on for Shadowrun are due right now, and it's a constant state of word count horse trading where a chapter comes in and it's a little bit undercount and writers are jumping on and saying, oh, that was 2,000 words undercount. Can I have those 2,000 words? Sure. It turned out we didn't need them. And if you have a use for them, you can have them with my blessing. And that's, you don't have to be bound by what you initially thought was the outline. If it turns out something needs to be 5,000 words or 10,000 words more or less, that's fine. You found that out. But at least the outline helped you get to the point where you could figure that out.
Yeah.
So, if you've written 15,000 words of your 20,000 word chapter, like this chapter's done, there's nothing more it needs. Okay, then you just found out it's a 15,000 word chapter, and that's okay.
Yeah. And another great thing about viewing constraints as being boundaries that are a little bit flexible is that when you decide to break those boundaries, you will be making that decision because you feel like it's needed.
Right.
That's a good idea. That's a good point.
Because like if Project White Stripes went to 301 pages, that one page would be absolutely necessary.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it ended up being 316 because of the index.
And the index is necessary.
Yeah.
Let him guess.
But it's a good way to make sure that when you're indulging in excess, which is your license as a designer is to indulge in excess, but that you're doing it mindfully and that you're not adding anything just for its own sake.
That's a good point. That's a great idea. I like that a lot. I appreciate that. I guess a follow-up question I have would be when do you know the time is right to make an exception and add space or add an expansion? Because I love what you're saying. I wrote down notes. If you're typing, I was writing down. I was almost dictating what you were saying because I'm like, this is fantastic. But I know myself and I know how my mind works, and I am scared of getting to the point where I can rationalize every expansion. So how do you know when it's a good idea? How do you discipline yourself to be like, this is a bad idea, this is a wonderful idea, things like that?
Sometimes that's other eyes that need to tell you that, because you don't always know for sure. I mean, I hope my instincts are okay now that I've
Mm,
been doing this for a while,
mhm,
that I kind of know what things need and I can approximate, but nothing's ever exact and no one ever knows everything all the time. And that's when it can be good to have another set of eyes. Shadowrun books tend to have a lot of writers on it. So you can always dive to the other writers and say, what if we add this? Run that by them and see what other writers think. Just
mm.
get a range of opinions.
Yeah.
They're not always going to be right, but it can help.
Or a lot of other indie designers. Cassie here. Just hit someone up and just be like, hey, talk me out of adding 5 more guns, please.
That's fair. That's a great idea.
And if they can't, maybe it's a good idea. Add 5 more guns.
I have just been sitting here.
Tony's so right. Play the game as well.
Yeah.
Tony's so right.
Play the game. That's
Tony's
a very,
never
very
been
good
more
idea.
right in his life. Tony is so perfectly and immaculately right with the sentence, play the game, let play tell you.
Yeah. No, that's a really good one. That's a really good idea. These are great suggestions. I'm still reeling from the idea of translating the gun mechanics to social encounters.
It's cute. It's a cute thing. I love it.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. But no, this idea, this structure, I think is very good. I guess, I mean, I've made notes on what questions to ask you, Jason, but I think that there should be, God damn, you actually dealt with a lot of it, but I have another question. But before that one, I feel like the right thing to do right now would be almost to give you a wild card of like, do you have any thoughts on the system that I've presented that you think are terrible, wonderful, amazing, should never see the light of day, and you're going to insult my upbringing, like whatever? Like, is there anything that you have thoughts on as far as the design that you want to just throw me?
You're getting dangerously close to violating my no self-deprecation policy.
Oh no, he may be deprecating me.
You're dangerously close. You're this close, Ben.
That's fair. That's fair.
But we can deprecate each other, right?
That's fair. Jason, we found a loophole.
Right.
Power gaming.
That terrible game designer has a wonderful idea. No, I'm just kidding.
How dare you,
Jason? What was it? But if you had any thoughts on the system, what appeals to you, and what you here? Let's do some collective. What appeals to you, or what you think that I should retool? Is that a positive way of putting that?
Sure.
Yeah. So how does that sound?
So I think one thing that stands out to me, and this is really important, is that you have a vision of what you want this thing to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you know kind of the goal you're working towards. One of my favorite writers once said that the way you write a short story is you throw an ending out into the lake and swim out to it. So I think you know what the ending that you want is. So it's just a question of swimming out to it. There's sometimes choppy waters, but that's really important, I think, in a game, is you know what you want it to feel like, you know what you want to accomplish. So that is an important part of it. And I think what you want to accomplish sounds fun. I think the moments that you're trying to capture sound like they'd be good moments at a gaming table. So I think that's a real good strength to build on.
Yeah.
As far as like details, a lot of it would just be nitty gritty and looking at how the dice rolls work. I like the ideas of all the different combinations of dice, seeing them in practice to make sure that all these different types of rolling work and feel cohesive would be another matter. But I can't, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But that's something that you would determine through your play testing.
Yeah. And Tony was saying play the game, and that's a very, very good point, and I appreciate that.
Both editions of Shadowrun I worked on, I learned sad lessons through playtesting of things that I really wanted to happen, and then playtesting said, no, that's not going to be how it works.
Broken my heart too. It's my advice is, as soon as that little baby horse can walk, you playtest.
Okay.
Yeah, I had like a 5-page concept document of Shadowrun 6 that we started playtesting really like years before it came out, just to try to get some of the central mechanics lined up.
Yeah, no, I've Tony said, why won't these players play game on? There's another game that I wanted to do that was kind of open rules, like sort of like a Powered by the Apocalypse open rule system. And I went to test it, and I found out immediately that a lot of that you can be too open. You can be too poorly defined, and that hit a wall immediately. So I'm seeing what you're saying, like testing these things very very crucial. I can see that. I appreciate that. I appreciate your perspective on that. Okay. I had a bunch of notes, and like your answer to the first one dealt with a bunch of them. I guess the last one I had here as the question was, and it's I have here where to start. Like where, if I have the system, this loot and this combat, and I'm figuring social encounters and stuff with a system that's like as wide, it covers as many things as this. Where would you start figuring things out? Like which thing would you layer everything onto first, or something like that? Like how do you decide priorities in a multifaceted system? Is what I'm trying to get at.
There's no right way. It's whatever way I can find in. So do I know something that I can start working on now, and then that can go from there. So for example, on the system I mentioned earlier that I can't talk about because it's not publicly released.
Shadowrun 8,
it's not publicly announced. Yeah, we were talking to Gen Con that the next Shadowrun is just going to be Shadowrun 10, and then we're going to constantly refer to the 7, 8, and 9 edition wars. 7 and 9 were great. 8 was crap. What were they thinking of with 8?
I honestly don't even know. It's a bit. That's why you can't find any copies of it.
Yeah. But on that system, we needed, as we were designing it, we needed to work on some city building, resource management. And so that's not an easy task to come up with, especially if you don't want it to be too cumbersome. Like I didn't necessarily want to track the exact amounts of each resource that a city was accumulating. That would be too much.
Yeah.
So once I found a way in, and could say, well, what if I put resources like on a scale of 1 to 10? Then I could play with that. And just finding some way to start playing with and build from there, and I, build out from there, and then I could tie some other mechanics to that and expand beyond. So there's no like right place to start. It's, can you figure out a place that you can grasp right now, and then once you grasp that part, you can extend from there. Okay. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yep. Absolutely. I was not kidding when I made my solar system metaphor earlier. Like for me, it's very much you start with a central mechanic and you build around it. You build around it. You keep building around it until you're in space or whatever.
But sometimes you do start with the Earth and figure out what it's going around.
Yeah. You figure out what else is going. You figure out what it's going around. You figure out what else is going around. Yeah. But you've,
yeah.
As long as something's getting built.
As long as something's happening. Oh yeah, for sure. Z's. I would love to. Ben, do you have any more questions? Because we've got some time.
I think I made a list, and I've expected all of these to be separate questions, and then the way that Jason was so frustratingly thoroughly thoughtful that like the first 3 of my questions were done in by his answer to the first thing.
So I have a pitch that I would, if you're open to this, if you're both open to this, I would love for us and chat to talk right now about how a person makes an outline.
Okay.
Like, what are the actual steps involved from going from an idea and some notes in your head to an outline that can be fleshed out and turned into a full comprehensive book?
Okay, yeah, I'm down for that. I'd be good for that. We can discuss. Jason, did you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah.
Oh, so many.
Yeah, I would love to hear them as somebody who is. I write a lot of small games, so my outlining process is just typically pretty easy. So I would love to learn more about how a more complex project is outlined, actually.
I mean, as I've mentioned before, the very first thing to separate yourself from is that there is the right outline. There is no right outline. There is no one way of organizing it that is the right way to organize your material. You could look at just about any game RPG out there and find someone who thinks it's organized really well and someone who thinks it's organized really terribly, because our brains tend to organize differently than each other. And so the way I think isn't going to be the way someone else thinks. So don't get too caught up in thinking this has to be the right way to organize. There are certainly better and worse ways to organize. If you separate similar content too much, that's going to be a problem. But don't worry too much about finding the perfect way to organize as finding a way to organize.
My suggestion here is to read TTRPG books. And when you find one that you just like eat up, that you like read cover to cover and it makes sense to you, study that table of contents.
Yep.
Because that's organization.
Yeah, that's very good advice, is to look at what's out there.
Yeah. Like, go pick up your Dungeon Dragon manual, read it, and what's it doing?
That's you know what? I've had books that are not helpful and books that are extremely helpful. And now I'm thinking about this, and I think that that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, I like that. I think this is a good approach, finding a structure. Yeah, thank you. I keep trying to think of what to add, but no, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Jason, please.
And then remember that the function of any beginning, so the first chapter, the first line, the first whatever, is to make you want to read the rest of it and to make you want to use the book. So whether you're talking about the mechanics or the world, or hopefully both, that first chapter should do something so that people read the book are like, I'm absolutely going to read more of this because this is cool and I'm really excited to play this. So if you start out with a very dry description of mechanics, it's going to take a special sort of person to latch onto that. That doesn't mean you can't start with mechanics, but you have to make them come alive somehow. If you start with your world, you don't want to do necessarily dry dump exposition. You might want to do something in the universe, do something attention grabbing. But even in role-playing writing, which is, you know, considerably different than fiction, you still want to grab people by the throat. You don't want to give them a chance to get bored, especially at the beginning. So that should inform your outline. What's the first thing you're going to put in that's going to make people want to read more and want to play the game? And then you're going to go from there. But especially near the beginning, if you can give an overview, a simplified overview of the system in a way that people say, okay, I have the basics and I know why this is going to be cool, then you can extend it out from there to show them, and this is how it works in combat. This is how it works in social situations. This is how it works in whatever situation Jason isn't thinking of right now, and break it down from there. But beyond that, there's a lot of ways of doing it. Do you want to have a lot of universe stuff up front and then more mechanics? Do you want to go with a little universe mechanics and then put a lot of adventure stuff in the back? There's a ton of ways to do it that are dependent a lot on your vision of what this is going to be and how people are going to use it.
That makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that. I'm writing that down, and I think this is a good way to censor and seeing it, visualizing it all as because I always thought, like, you know, I would switch over to a book design, you know, once I was far enough along, but seeing it as a book from the get-go is something that feels very helpful to consider.
Oh yes.
I was about to make a self-deprecating joke and I didn't, so I'm growing as a person.
That was my old college project. My friend just had like a smattering of chaotic notes and everywhere. And the amount of effort that it took for me to turn that into a book format, because I was the English major, so it was my job. Like the amount of work it took to take those chaotic raving notes and turn them into a cohesive game manual, way more than it takes to just write like that from the get-go.
Yeah. That makes sense. So that's something
that's right. We should design straight into layout.
That's a. There's things I got to consider. Yeah, this is I appreciate this. Was there anything else to discuss with design or anything? I'm not sure what to bring up on this.
Yeah, we're still in the Ben zone. You can still freely ask us questions. Chat can also ask Jason questions. Because we've got, before I start our descent, we've got a good 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. Let me think. Okay, with trying to think how to phrase this question that I have. I'm trying to think. In a system that is very action based and stuff, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. But do you ever worry about overcomplicating a thing or making a system too? I know that Shadowrun has a lot of heavy rules and it's very strong for it, but like I know I always worry when I'm making something that I'm making too many rules for no reason or something like that, or that I'm overcomplicating it. I know you talked about having a unified system that's got social gun rules and stuff like that, but like what's Blue D8 with you? I was gonna say, trying to think, do you ever worry about like overcomplicating something, I guess what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, like coming from someone who made a 400-page Shadowrun 5 and then all the core books and all that. So there's a lot. And heaven knows I don't remember all the rules all the time. That's why I have books to make it so it doesn't have to stay in my brain. So it can get overcomplicated, and I'd like a big, chunky system. So that's great. But you worry about how much, at what point is it going to get tough on the player's attention, where instead of playing the game, they're flipping pages and looking up tables. And so that's a constant worry. I don't think there's a perfect solution to it, because you want to give options to players, but you don't want to load them down with too much. And it's not always the same from player to player. There's players who I could dump all the rules on them until I die and they'd still be happy and ask for more. And there's other players who just want anarchy, or think anarchy maybe has a few too many things and it shouldn't go beyond that. And neither of them are wrong. So it's just kind of a feel thing. You just gotta see what it feels like to you for what you're trying to do in that particular game.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, trial, experimentation, getting feedback.
Yeah.
These things.
My advice would be, every time you're about to create a new rule or a new mechanic, stop and say, do I already have a rule or mechanic I could use for this?
That's a very good approach.
Like, if the answer is like yes, but it's not as good, okay, good, go for it, guns blazing. Because like Jason said, that's entirely up to you. But if you're concerned about continuing to add different rules and mechanics, try reusing them.
Yeah, that's fair. What is the Blue D8? Because I'm sitting here, and the reason I'm asking is because I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, I could come up with a rule for Blue D8s right now. I don't know if that's what they're saying.
This is the tower chiming in. Also, I've been saying things sporadically and didn't realize I was muted to y'all the entire time.
You were so muted.
So y'all couldn't hear anything that I said. And I was like, wow, these jerks.
We missed your witticisms.
You just said that all the different dice, even different colors, will mean things. So when I was trying to think of a question, I was like, what does a Blue D8 do? Which was
basically the color of dice in one system that I have is basically the colors of dice is what table you check. So there's like, if you have like a gray die, a white die, you check the common table, the blue die, you check an uncommon table, and then so forth. So it has the rarity of the items. So like you roll, like, let's say, for example, in the current iteration, you roll a D20 to see what type of item you get. And so like if it's a 1, it might be a pistol. If it's a 6, it might be like a shield or something like that, or a trinket or a healing item and stuff like that. And then the color of die is the rarity. So like, let's say you roll a blue die and it's a D20, but it lands on an 8. then you might go through and check the table and say, okay, I look up an uncommon gun. An uncommon gun is a gun defined as or uncommon pistol. An uncommon pistol is a pistol that has one modifier. So then after you have the pistol and you have an uncommon level, then you would roll one modifier on the uncommon table, which might be that it shoots 2 bullets. It might be that it has a shield on it. It might be that it's extra accurate and things like that. So what color die you get is how many modifiers there are to the weapon, how many modifiers there are to the loot that you get and the potential power of it. So if you defeat an enemy, a regular enemy might say they roll 2 white dice, but a boss of a storyline might have you roll 6 white dice, 3 blue dice, and 1 golden die. And then the golden die, of course, being very, very cool loot that you can get on the table. Does that speak to your question? As far as a D8, I think the dice that aren't D20s would basically be for different skill levels with guns and accuracy and things like that. So I don't know if I would have a blue D8 specifically do something, but I'm still looking at the loot tables and whether they're different dice sizes, because something that I was considering was maybe very rare item types, like a body modification or something, might only be attached to the number 12 or 18 or something. So if you kill an enemy that only rolls 1d6 loot, then you physically can't get it. Was an idea that I was considering. So that's what the D8s would do. That's what a blue D8 would do in rambling succinctness.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. See, this is the part of the sales pitch. You asked if I had an elevator. Viewers asked me before if I had an elevator pitch, and I feel like I can do like a sort of like jazz hand showy thing. But I'm not sure what to emphasize in the system, because I get excited when I talk about the loot and how the colors correspond to all these things. But I'm also trying to figure out what to front load in a sales pitch for this game. So now you know how the colors play into it.
Okay.
I would front load the thing that would make it exciting for the players, the moment that you think the players are going to be having the most fun. And you mentioned that
multiple colored dice.
Rolling to get the big, the big
old mitt full of dice.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the heart of your elevator pitch.
Who doesn't love a mitt full of dice?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you go through and you shoot, like I said, you see the color-coded dice, and now you see that now. So you roll through and like you shoot the bad guy, and the bad guy's like, I was going to do it if it weren't for you meddling kids. Then the GM sits there, grabs a bunch of dice, they count them out, and this is, in my mind, I'm a very theatrical GM, so I think about what the visual would be for that moment of a GM going through, going, okay, I'm getting 5 white dice, I'm getting 4 blue, and the players would be sitting there anticipating that moment, like looking, and then the GM just rolls, and they go through, and they're like, there's the gold die, that's the gold die, is it a 20, is it a 6, oh, it's an 8, it's an 8, 8s are pistols, we have a legendary pistol, people, like, that's the moment that I want to see happen in the game, and that's what I'm excited about.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. And that's the thing, is that you're consistently like 40% more animated when you're talking about the loot in this game. And that's not a slam, that's not a dunk. No, that's just like that's the emotional center of your game, is picking up a mitt full of dice and looking through it like raccoons for cool shit.
Yes, that's
and it's fun. That sounds
but
fun.
Your excitement will come through as you describe it, and that's generally a good thing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the thing that I want, is I want, what was it? The phrase LOOTSPLOSION is fairly straightforward, but it comes from my favorite character in Borderlands, who talks like a monster truck announcer. And when you finish his content, he basically says, that's it, folks. The heroes have saved the day. And now they get a LOOTSPLOSION. And you see it's like a million color-coded guns come from the ceiling. And it's the greatest moment. And I don't personally know systems that recreate that in tabletop games. And it's been my biggest why not? Why isn't there a system that gives you that moment in the game? So that's I feel like I want to address a niche of just having that excitement of going through a bunch of loot at once. So and so now I'm talking to you and realizing what I'm getting excited about, and I appreciate that. So thank you, both of you, all 3 of you. I say both of you. I'm looking at a chat with 3 people right now. They told me that Tony can't be on camera, and I just edited him out of how I talk, but he's here and very helpful and kind.
Tony is making the plane go.
Yes, Tony is wonderful.
Tony is in the baggage compartment making the plane go, and he can't leave till we land.
Tony put kill, loot, repeat in the chat, and I want a system where you can spend a session doing that. Like I want a system where you can role play and be characters that are fun and go on like sort of Firefly space hijinks. I think that would be very cool. And then maybe a system where it is exciting to just go and like, oh, there's a warehouse full of bad guys, and we did that for 2 hours, and then we have all of this loot to go through. And so that's something I wanted. Session play 5 minutes, loot takes 90 minutes. Part of me's going hell yeah. Like but I have to go through. Yeah.
But if you go hell yeah, then good.
Mm-hmm.
You want hell yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's y'all are great. I really, really appreciate this. And I'm going over in my head what's exciting and what I want to work on. And also the idea of having the outline, approaching this as a book, not design layout yet, because that terrifies me. But the idea of having... okay, here's a question for you, Jason. And this is an abstract question that there might not be an answer to right now. How do you estimate page sizes? Like you're saying that Shadowrun is 300 pages, but like gut reaction off the top of your head, I tell you this concept, how many pages does something like that sound to you? Like I don't don't even know how to estimate that. Like if it's not, you asked me at the beginning how many it is.
Yeah, well, I'd go with word count first, and that's usually how I do chapters is word count rather than pages. And some of it is the market you want to reach, but I don't think you want to go too heavy. So I would probably, for a core book of the type you're thinking of, I would start with a 75 to 100,000 word outline.
Okay. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, because you're looking for something gritty, but you're also looking for something really freewheeling and really energetic.
So I could even see it getting down to 50, but 75 might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate that. See, things I'd figure out, like the class system. I don't even know if I want. How does inventory fit in the process? That is a Tony has to have inventory fit in the process. If you're listening to this, that is a question that I've had for myself for a while, and I think inventory is minimal because I don't want there to be a lot of rummaging. D&D does something that cracks me up every single time. I run a lot of games, and every time you make a character, they tell you how many pittons you have for pinning down, for building tents. And I have run hundreds of games over the years, and I've had one player, I think, use a pitton once. Can you just carry 1,000 guns? You can carry 3 guns, 2 that you have equipped, 1 that you have on the side to swap into. And you can spend an action to swap out the gun. And I said you get 2 actions, so you can spend 1 action with a shotgun, 1 action with an SMG, or you can, 2 shotguns or 1 shotgun swapping out for the other gun. Inventory, you have a very, very limited number of items. Like I'm talking like less than 5 items, I'm thinking. And these items have like a cooldown. Dungeon 5e does not care. That is correct. I have a rant about that. Dungeons and Dragons, which has neither dungeons nor dragons at this point. But what was I going to say? The very few items. The items that you have would basically have cooldowns of limited times. Like I mentioned before, limited times they can be used in combat and contribute to the story, and then they have to cool down afterwards. There may be out of combat items that have a day-long cooldown or some other way to limit them. I do not want items that you need to role play through. Like we're joking about the pittons and stuff like that. I don't want the pedantics of like, well, you're in a tunnel. Did you bring a flashlight? It's like, oh, you're climbing a mountain. Did you bring gloves? Like, I don't want to do that. There's a lot of sci-fi games that are doing this more and more. And I love it because it's such a fuck it answer. And they present it as a serious, dramatic thing, but it's always their way of going, fuck it. And it's the Omni tool in Mass Effect, which is just this glowing hand thing that does all of the things that you would have to do with an inventory if it didn't exist. Like it's your calculations, it's your communications, it's your hacking systems, it's your storing things, it's your shield, and omni-tool. And I want to take that approach to inventory in LOOTSPLOSION, of having vaguely hand waved how inventory works and stuff like that. The sound ratchet, yeah. The sonic screwdriver, all that stuff. Like more and more sci-fi is giving you one item that as long as you have that item, you have your full equipment. And that's kind of how I want to do inventory management in LOOTSPLOSION, outside of which guns and shields you have. I don't know the system for Shadowrun, and I'm worried that at some point in my dunking on systems, I've insulted Jason, who is brilliant and kind.
It's, first of all, no, I haven't felt insulted. Second of all, it's nothing I haven't seen on the internet, so it's fine.
I put it in the chat, but Shadowrun still has shadows and running in it, so they're fully in the clear as far as staying focused on the name.
Yeah, I think that's the weird thing about Dungeons and Dragons is like all of their most famous adventures at this point in 5th edition, almost none of them have dungeons. And because I told you I do professional gaming, I have like clients that tell me like, hey, listen, I've been subscribing to your service for Dungeons and Dragons for a year. When is there a dragon? And then like I'm like, there might be one sometime, and it's like, okay. So, but no, I like it when the concept is very focused and doesn't lose sight of itself like that. That's my answer to inventory.
Okay. Alrighty. Well,
thank you for all of this and for giving me the platform to ramble. I really do appreciate it.
We are beginning our descent, everybody. So as we prepare for landing, Ben, how are you feeling about your project right now?
Very excited, very giddy. I have a clear focus of where to go next with my outline and my game mechanics, and I feel like I have a good sense of direction, which is what I asked for. Thank you. I have opened a lot. I have a lot more notes. Yeah, I actually opened new tabs during this conversation and did not realize that until you said that. When you said that, I looked over and I'm like, oh, dear God, I opened like 3 more tabs while he was talking.
No.
I'm going to do the outline. I'm going to do the outline after this. You have helped me so much, Jason, Kat. Thank you so much.
Very happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So, very briefly, before I read the ending script, which I have prepared, Jason, I would love for you to give us an outro. I would love for you to tell chat where they can find you and your many behaviors.
So, ShadowrunSixthWorld.com is the website. Shadowrun on Facebook usually has most of the updates. And if you want to see personal stuff I'm working on, Jason M. Hardy Writer on Facebook is where I put other stuff.
Wonderful, beautiful, and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is
happy to do it. This is fun.
Impeccable wisdoms. Thank you for sharing them with us.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Ben.
Yes.
Ben.
I'm here. I'm ready. I'm present.
Hi, Ben. Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell the audience where to find you, please?
Okay. So I'm on Twitter, GM Ben Competence. That's my professional one. I'll put that in the Discord in the Twitch right now. And
I have something.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no linkies in Twitch chat. It's naughty to do. But also, is your handle self-deprecating?
GM Ben Competence? Oh no, yes it is.
I brought this up in the +1 chat, and somebody pointed out that maybe it's just a Ben competence, like it's the Ben form of competence.
You know what? I like your take on it better. The short version of where it came from was I messed up playing Borderlands with a friend in a very unique way. And he's like, "What happened?" I said, "That's not normal incompetence. That's Ben competence." And he paused. There was a silence for a second. I said, "I think I have my online brand." He said, "Yeah, you do." And then that was the moment. So I'm realizing, yeah, that is that exactly what you said.
Yeah, it's your own. Instead of your own incompetence, it's your own competence.
Mm-hmm. It's my own competence. Yeah. I'm reclaiming that. I'm reclaiming an insult that I made for myself. Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful. I really appreciate you all.
Okay. So we can find Ben at Ben Competence. You are you are also a pro GM. Do you do that on like start playing or?
I do on start playing games. I can put my link in the the chat we're using to run this game right now. Is that okay? Or okay. Yeah. And that's you can do that. I have tables. I'm running Curse of Strahd. I'm running City of Mist. Phenomenal games. I guess I'll be running Shadowrun soon. We'll see how that goes.
Nice.
But yeah, you can find me there. It's be glad to have you.
Alrighty. Everyone, we have safely arrived at our destination. Remember that you can find our episodes on YouTube if you've missed any.
Thank you.
It's also simultaneously cast. Like if you want to watch this episode, it's on YouTube right now. That's not part of my script. You can tell because I'm talking like this. Anyway. Thank you for flying with us today. And remember, your dreams don't have to stay grounded. You're clear for takeoff. Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We've got a couple of great shows coming up, including tomorrow night. We are playing Planet Fist with Jess Levine, the creator of it. It is a PBTA Fist-inspired tactical tabletop war game. Also, if you have not yet, please check out RPG Zine Club, an upcoming offering that we are launching later this month. It's a subscription service that will help crowdsource support for emerging and expanding creators who are making short zine-length projects, and helps us create better support for them in the long term. We're also playing doing Monstrous Prep with Kyle Latino on Sunday. Come back for any or all of that stuff, or join us in 2 weeks.